Good morning, everyone. My name is Ilhong Ko from the Seoul National University Asia Center, and this is joint work with my colleague Jin Shim. Our presentation is titled Re-populating the Bangucheon Stream World Heritage Landscape with GIS Data. Today, we will explore how GIS data and GIS-based modeling can shed light on human movement around the Bangucheon petroglyphs, and how this challenges the way World Heritage narratives often isolate designated sites from their surrounding cultural landscapes. Let me begin by briefly introducing the site, Petroglyphs along the Bangucheon stream, which was inscribed on the World Heritage List this year. The site lies in the southeastern corner of the Korean peninsula and consists of a 3-kilometer long section of the Bangucheon stream marked by dramatic rock cliffs. There are two rock panels, the Daegongni rock panel, also known as Bangudae, and the Cheonjeonri rock panel. As stated in the site's OUV, the rock carvings were created by successive generations from the Neolithic period to the Silla Kingdom. Now, in relation to these rock carvings, our starting question has been, who were the local inhabitants and where did they live? This is because UNESCO criteria emphasize universal value, highlighting the unique and globally significant features of the petroglyphs, while marginalizing nearby non-designated sites. At Bangucheon, attention has focused on the masterpieces left by Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Silla visitors, while the communities who created and engaged with them remain overlooked. So our aim, therefore, is to repopulate the heritage landscape by restoring the human presence around the rock carvings. In addition, World Heritage designation produces value hierarchies between listed and non-listed sites, and this fractures what was once a continuous cultural landscape. As the rock carvings become the central focus, surrounding settlements and ritual sites are relegated to the background, sometimes dismissed as just a buffer zone. So by reconstructing the potential routes of movement between contemporaneous sites and the rock carvings, we highlight that the World Heritage Site must be understood as part of a broader network of human mobility and interaction. So to briefly mention methodology, our research relies on the varied cultural heritage dataset provided by the Korea Heritage Service through its National Heritage GIS platform. And the routes were reconstructed using two approaches. First, the least cost path analysis, which calculates routes based on slope, and second, the hillslope position unit movement suitability model, which estimates routes based on terrain suitability. The latter methodology builds on earlier work by the authors. So now we will go on to the archaeology and the rock carvings themselves. So to begin with, the Korean Neolithic, which dates to around 8,000 to 1,500 BCE, the communities of the Korean Neolithic used pottery, but farming was quite rudimentary. In other words, especially in the southeastern region of the Korean peninsula, hunting, gathering, and fishing were the main subsistence strategies, and so people maintained overall a mobile lifestyle. And as you can see here on the map to the right, this is a reconstruction of what the coastline would have looked like around 6,000 years ago, and the red dot denotes where the Bangucheon petroglyphs are located. As you can see, at the time, they would have been quite close to the coast. And it is these mobile hunter-gathering communities who were responsible for producing many of the rock carvings that you can see at this World Heritage Site. And now to go on to the rock carvings themselves. So as mentioned earlier, the Bangucheon site consists of two locations featuring rock carvings. One is the Daegongni locale and the other is the Cheonjeonri locale. In terms of rock carvings made during the Neolithic period, they have been found at both locations. So first, in the case of the Daegongni rock face, it is possible to observe the naturalistic expressions of the animals that the communities would have hunted at the time. so mainly the images of whales, but also deer and wild boar. And interestingly enough, there are also images of the material culture that would have been used in subsistence strategies, such as the images of nets, fishing nets, and also the boats that took these communities into the seas. And to the right, you can see the images that are found at the Cheonjeonri rock face. Here you can also see the images of sharks and whales, and also of deer, and interestingly enough, an expression of a human face. Now let us think about the Neolithic communities that would have produced these rock carvings. So this map here presents the distribution of the Neolithic sites around the Bangucheon petroglyphs, which are marked with the red star. As you can see, the yellow dots can be found both inland, but also along the coast. And there's a specific concentration of yellow dots here, marked using the light green circle, which is a concentration of shell middens dating to the Neolithic periods. So we can see that this place was where Neolithic foraging activities would have taken place intensively, and was a place where Neolithic communities from the wider region would have come to. Now going on to the Bronze Age, the Korean Bronze Age dates to around 1500 to 300 BCE, and at this time farming became the dominant subsistence strategy and settlements became more permanent. Now the rock carvings dating to the Bronze Age are found at the Cheonjeonri location and consist of images such as those that you can see to the right, which are very abstract geometric images consisting of rhombuses and circles and concentric circles, spirals, and wavy lines. And what is interesting is that these abstract motifs can be also found at other rock carving sites further away from the Cheonjeonri site, and also they can also be found on ritual implements such as bronze mirrors that were used at the time. Now, if we have a look at the distribution of the Bronze Age communities that produced these rock carvings, as you can see here on this map, the green dots mark the Bronze Age sites. They comprise both settlement sites and also the dolmen sites, the burial sites of the time. And if you see closely here, you can also see the yellow darks that mark the Neolithic sites. And what is interesting about this layer distribution is that it allows us to identify key locations within the landscape that were repeatedly occupied, which I have marked here using the purple circle. So these two locations here to the bottom right are places where both Neolithic and Bronze Age occupations could be observed at a single site. And this is also the case for the area circled using the light blue circle, which happens to be the Gyeongju region. And finally, to go on to the early historic period, the Bangucheon site was also visited by literate individuals of the Silla Kingdom. And so to briefly introduce the Silla Kingdom, it originated as Harokuk, which is a small polity that is said to have emerged at 57 BCE, and later developed into Silla, which was one of the three kingdoms of Korea, and which later consolidated the remaining two kingdoms and became unified Silla. The capital of unified Silla was Kumsong, which is located in present-day Gyeongju, which in the previous slides was marked using the light blue circle. Now, if we have a look at the rock carvings that were produced by the Silla communities, first of all, there are the figurative images, which consists of scenes from everyday life, hunting scenes, scenes of boats, and also scenes of imaginary dragons, etc. But also, interestingly enough, there are many texts that have been carved into the rock face. So you can see that this is a place that not only was visited by prehistoric foragers and farmers, but later in the historic period by members of Silla society who were literate, who were capable of leaving textual records. And now to have a look at where these literate Silla individuals may have come from. This map here presents the distribution of the sites dating to the Silla period. As you can see here, the purple dots are distributed in high concentration around the Gyeongju area, which is to be expected since it was the capital of the time. And the light green marks represent the Bronze Age sites, and the red marks, the dots, mark the Neolithic sites. And so in this map, which combines data on the three periods, what it shows is that there were successive layers of communities who are all interacting within this landscape and who are visiting the Pangude rock carvings. And so this type of visualization underscores the long-term entanglement of the Bangucheon site with human movement across different historical horizons. Now I will go on to this historic human movement. So now we will go on to the reconstruction of the movement routes. So the strategy that we adopted in modeling the routes was first to use as the starting point of the routes to be modeled a point that was located in Gyeongju, so here. And the reason that we chose this point is because it was clearly occupied throughout all three time periods. And so this was the common starting point. And for the end point, what we did was we chose locations that were first located further south or southeast of the Bangucheon World Heritage Site, and also locations that could be reasonably be established as having been key locations because maybe the sites were found in high concentration, or also because the sites showed successive occupation, showing how important they were. So first, in the case of the Neolithic, this was selected as the starting point, and this area where the cluster of shell middens were located was established as the end point, and the routes were modeled using two types of algorithms. And so if you see here to the right, the green route is the one that is the traditional, typical LCP, least cost path, and the red route is the one that was modeled using the algorithm that was developed by the authors. And as you can see here, the traditional LCP routes comes quite close to the Bangucheon World Heritage Site, whereas the alternative route does go a bit further away. Now going on to the Bronze Age, the starting point again was situated here. And in the case of the Bronze Age, the end point was this area here, where you could see the successive occupation, not only from the Neolithic period, but also the Bronze Age. And again, we modeled the two routes based using the two different types of algorithms. And it was possible to observe that the traditional LCPs, again, came quite closer to the Bangucheon site, whereas the alternative routes were located a bit further. Finally, in the case of the Silla routes, the starting point was located here, and the end route was established here, because this is a key location where we have seen a concentration of Silla burials and also other ritual sites. And in this case, the modeling of the two routes using the two different algorithms resulted in routes that were quite similar with slight differences. Then what are the implications of the route modeling results? Well, each reconstruction highlights how the rock carvings were not located directly on major routes. So as you can see here, even in the case when the reconstructed routes were located quite near the petroglyphs, the petroglyphs were not actually located along the routes. And what this suggests is that people had to make deliberate choices to visit the site. And this acts to underscore the cultural and ritual importance of the sites. However, in terms of accessibility, the site was highly accessible. And this is because although the Bangucheon petroglyphs occupy a location that is hidden from the main thoroughfares, they are still within reach of the key routes. not only the routes that were modeled, but also the well-known corridors of movement that were formed by the Yangsan Fault, which is located here, or the Tewa River and its tributary, the Tokchon tributary. And so what this suggests, again, is that they were surrounded by key routes of movements through which they could be accessible. But interestingly enough, while being accessible, they were also hidden, as you can see here in the way that the landscape is formed. And so this combination of concealment and accessibility may have been a deliberate pull factor that encouraged repeated visits across time. And it is from this point that we can focus on the value of this World Heritage Site. So to conclude, World Heritage frameworks often foreground monumental aspects of designated sites while backgrounding the lived landscapes around them. But through GIS visualization and route modeling, we have sought to repopulate the Bangucheon heritage landscape with the communities who actually moved through it, the Neolithic hunter-gatherers, the Bronze Age farmers, and also the Silla elites. And in this way, the site emerges not just as a repository of timeless images, but as a dynamic node within a wider cultural landscape shaped by human mobility. Thank you very much.